Welcome back to another episode of LineageView. Today I'm going to be talking about the video that I made with Irate Gamer. So let's take it back to 2008. So I first discovered YouTube in this year, and I found that there was a massive retro gaming community on YouTube. People such as the Angry Video Game Nerd. I also stumbled across a channel called the Irate Gamer. I was instantly captivated because there was not only great reviews, but there was these really sort of groundbreaking visual effects that I'd never seen on any other videos, and it was far above the quality of the videos I'd seen at the time. This is the first thing that introduced me to visual effects. I was like, I want to be able to do this. I used to speak with my brother about it and say, I want to make videos like this. I want to do these special effects, I called them at the time. And so I went onto YouTube, I learned how to do it, I researched it for years and years, and I started to get progressively better with After Effects. I never stopped watching the Irate Games videos, and it was just something that I really enjoyed watching. They're sort of like funny, silly reviews. They have informative information on it, but also great reviews, great visual effects, and it's just a great time to see. Now, I saw a couple of months ago, as I follow Chris, the Irate Gamer, on Facebook, that he was looking for people to help him with script writing, editing, visual effects, that sort of thing. So this was my opportunity. I wanted to work with the person that first introduced me to visual effects, which is a huge deal. It's a massive deal, actually. We worked on the script together and we sent it back and forth. You know, I would do my input, he would do his input, and we would sort of collate a script together. From there, I would then capture all the game footage, then I would put it all in the editor, choose the right music. Music is an essential part to these videos. Whilst, even though it's in the background, it plays such a huge role, narrates the whole video essentially, so music choice was really important. I needed to make sure that I was using music from the games, but also different music too, you know, Blaster Master, Castlevania, those sorts of games, anything with a great soundtrack from like the NES days. So Chris sent me the footage across. I'll show you my timeline. I'll also be breaking down the visual effects because I feel like people will want to know what went into these shots, and I'll be happy to break that down now. So let's jump into Adobe Premiere. I'll show you how I've edited this. So as an overview, everything you see on the screen here, these are all individual cuts. Anywhere you see little portions like this, these are just cuts. Now bear in mind, if you're working with multiple sources at once, you're going to need multiple stacks of different footages, like different layers. So what you can see here, this one path is just footage. It's just the original footage that Chris sent me that's been chopped up. What you don't see is all the other visual effects and elements that have gone into it. Bear in mind, I didn't do almost any of the visual effects in Premiere, which is not really what it's made for. You can use it that way, but it's not what it's ideally made for if you're going to sort of do it like this. So this is all of the different elements that have gone on top. So that is B-roll, that is visual effects that go on top. There is effects that you add to the footage, so I graded all of this footage inside of Premiere. Not only is this all the footage, but on this row here, this is all the audio. And so this is just the voiceover. As you'll see, I'm very unorganized, but it's an organized mess, I would say. Like, I can keep up with it, you know? Here's all the different elements. So this is anything from sound effects, like external game sound effects from like other games that fit here. There's the music from other games, there's the music from the original footage, there's the voiceover on top of there as well. Transition sound effects, there's a lot going on in this edit. So this can take you hours and hours normally. So if you're stuck in an edit, even if the clip's only 20 minutes long, if you've got like footage that's 20 minutes, you know, you could be working on it for hours. Just because it takes hours and it's not that long doesn't mean you've not put a lot of work in. You just got to keep working at it and get better. Right, if you have any comments about how you're getting stuck during editing or how to do anything better, leave it in the comments below. I'm working on a video on editing quickly, editing efficiently, making sure you're doing what the client wants, because that's super important. Because think about it, you can do it your way, but if you're going against what the client necessarily wants, they'll either send it back to you or they won't come back to you at all. It's really important. So listen to what your client wants. Honestly, leave any comments down below. I'll be doing a video very soon, okay? That's the edit, basically. That's all we have for this edit. It's pretty straightforward as things go. You need to make sure, if you're doing a video like this, to have some sort of sync clap. So you clap, and you can link up your footage to your audio. In this case, the audio was already synced when Chris sent it to me, which was great, but in some cases, like the video you're currently watching, before I did a clap to sync up my microphone to the camera footage. Not only just that, but to the footage that I'm recording the screen on. You'll have on the audio channel a distinctive loud clap. You can drag them all together. It's really easy, honestly. Okay, so there was 5 main visual effects in this piece. There's 5 like significant, like bulky visual effects that I did. I did all of that inside of After Effects, CS6 or 2020, whichever one this is, the latest one anyway. So I'll be going through and sort of breaking down what I did. There's quite a lot of interesting techniques used here. Each shot seems to have something different going on, even some things that I've never tried before, but I tried it and it worked, so great. So this is the first clip. So if we were to break this down, on first glance, it seems like quite a straightforward shot. The Irate gamer is angry at the game. This is when he's playing Hogan's Alley. So this guy comes on. Then there's that bright light. Then you see Chris spinning. And then that's it. So, to break this down, it was relatively straightforward for the most part. Because Chris is an absolute professional, he sent me the best reference I could have possibly asked for. So he sent me a blank slate. This will be a picture or part of the video that you leave on afterwards, where he leaves the frame and it's just the background. So what you can do during those points is you can drop that on, and then essentially you can cut him out of the scene and he doesn't need to be there. You can do anything with the scene. So if he needs something removing from the scene, you can do that with a blank slate. It's really, really handy, and because again he's a professional, he sent everything and it was spot on. So that's, as far as visual effects go, that was like a dream to work with. So the next thing was, I needed to get this character from the game. I'll explain how I animated it in just a moment. So what this was a still frame from the game. So if I cut this out, this should have been a lot easier than it was, but for some reason this just happens with Adobe After Effects sometimes. Okay, so I wanted this still frame. Now in hindsight, I should have taken it into Photoshop and cut around, because there's a lot of contrast. You can just take out the blacks and then you're left with this character. Easy enough. What I ended up doing, because I thought this was the best route at the time, was going onto the rotor brush, cutting around the character and then dragging it back in. I thought that would work well, and to be fair, that was only one frame. It was one frame of animation, but for some reason the rotor brush just doesn't seem to like it, because it seems to go better with objects that are moving in sort of 24 frames, realistic frames, not just one picture, so it got a bit confused. So that's where most of these problems came from. Anyway, so I screenshotted that one isolated element, then I dragged it back into the scene, and you'll see here I've gone on, we'll talk about time remapping in a minute. So I've gone on the position and I've simply drawn this line here and dragged this character across. In fact, I'll turn motion blur off. So this is what it looked like before. So he simply runs into scene. A really good tip as well, you'll see that the positions look different than if you were to do it straight away. The way to make, they've got ease in turned on. You turn that on by pressing F9 on the keyboard. What that will do is it will smooth the frames in between, so it's not so jarring and sort of jagged. Each way has, you know, a desired effect. This is what I wanted, because I wanted a smooth looking motion, and this is like the easiest way to add a professional filter onto your visual effects. Turn on motion blur. It should automatically turn this on when you press this, but if it doesn't, push this, because this is the motion blur for all layers basically, and you have to manually set it. So if you want to turn it off that way. So turning motion blur on is really handy, because he comes in this really sort of fluid motion, which is really nice. Because I've taken this from the game itself, there's no animation of him sort of turning and shooting as such. So I needed to improvise here, because it was almost like you could do with the camera facing away from Chris and having him there, because that would make more sense in this situation. So as a visual effects artist, you have to improvise in these situations. So what we did, or what I did I suppose, is animated him sort of rushing towards Chris and used the age-old technique of doing a white flash just to cover up any evidence of what's happening, and at that point Chris starts spinning with the 2000 logo from the game itself. So the reason I did the white is because if you were to remove that, he would literally just hit him, and you can see his sort of legs are exposed there, you know, and then he moves away, and then that happens. This is just, again, another way to, in fairness, it works out better this way because it's more impactful, because it's a white flash, it sort of hits you in the face, so that's really handy. That works for almost anything, to be fair. So at this point, Chris sent me the video of, he sent me loads of stills of him sort of spinning around in a circle, which was really good, which is like it is in the game. In the game it's jarring, it's, you know, 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. So I wanted to do something slightly different. I wanted to add a bit of motion blur. What I did instead was frame blending. So it's these buttons here. So what it does is, rather than just having 4 individual frames, it almost adds frames in between, so you're not getting any more frames, but you're getting the blur as if that was happening. So they're merging together, and it really adds for a more solid look. This overall isn't a very complicated shot, so there's just a few elements. I mean, as I said, this is just taken from the game in the same way that this was taken from the game, and there was a bit of time remapping just to really sell that punch of him sort of, the inertia of him turning around and stopping all of a sudden, to really sell the spin. So this is where it happens. He'll spin round, and then it hits there, and then it comes in. So I've had to time this differently. But yeah, again, it's an easy enough shot to do if you sort of take enough time with it. So that's one of the shots. So one of the other shots is the Professor Hector shot. So again, this is a sprite taken from the game. So what I did is a shape layer, and I've animated it according to what Chris was saying. So you can check the audio waveform by clicking on the audio, making sure that's turned on. Go down to audio, go down to waveform. This is really handy, especially for audio cues like this. So you can see that all of this, every time this goes above like this bottom level, then there's some signal coming through, so it moves accordingly to that. I just hand animated it. Yes, it takes a while, but it's worth it because it looks the way it does. So that's really handy. So this shot again was perfectly sent to me. This one, I just sat there and I was like, this is perfect. Chris has been doing this for a long time. You can tell from this shot. So he sent this across, which the throw was perfect because it was the right speed it needed to be. He perfectly matched the speed of this second shot, and it came through, and you can actually see the shoebox a little bit there. So I'll take all these elements off. So this is the shot that he sent across, which was, well, it looks like a wand box or something, whatever it may be, and it's a shoe hitting it and then flying off. He will be hit as the box is hit. Now you may have seen something quite tricky just then. So there is a little bit of rotoscoping. So that shoe's coming in so fast, there's a lot of motion blur, and the character has motion blur too once it hits it. So this fine bit of rotoscoping is enough to sell the piece. So this is 3 frames of rotoscoping, and then it's gone, and then he sort of just disappears from frame. And that shot, because the reference was set up perfectly, required almost no effort. So the next one was the Ronnie scene where he's in Wild Gunman. So this is a really interesting one. This is there's a lot of elements in this one. You'll see there's a lot of stuff going on here. I've edited this in a really strange way because I imported it directly from Premiere. So you'll see the shot, and it will go in between 2 regular clips of the Irate Gamer, and then it goes back, and then it goes back. Now, under normal circumstances, you wouldn't really edit like this. You would do shot by shot by shot, and you wouldn't include shots with no visual effects needed in that. It's not necessary, but in this case it made more sense to do it that way because I could keep everything consistent in the same project, and a shot like this with no visual effects requires almost no CPU power, so you know it's not doing any harm by being in there. So there's a lot going on here though. In this case I was sent this footage, you know, the green screen footage, and then I had to mask around the character, and you'll see all of this if you're not familiar with visual effects. What this is partnering layers, so you basically parent it to another one, and whenever you move something it will link it to that layer. This is really handy, and I've basically linked almost everything to layer 10 because this is your background footage. That's from the game itself. What I did with the green screen is I applied a thing called key light, which is After Effects version of a green screen key, which is really handy. So from there I just got the pen tool and dragged it onto the color with the most contrast, so it was around here. Don't ideally look for the darker sort of shadows. Green screens are very difficult to not get shadows on. It requires very precise lighting, so this is fine, this is very workable. So you take the bit, folds, again, you know, it takes that into consideration. Just because it looks darker doesn't mean it's not still a shade of green. It will still pick that up, especially key light. Key light's really good. So I had the position, so I hand animated him as well, but I also had him tracked to the layer, the background layer, because this whole entire layer is moving. So if we were to turn everything off, it's moving because I wanted it to feel real. I wanted it to feel like there was a camera holding it, seeing Ronnie. Even though in the context it's in a game. So this was really fun. So essentially there's a key light taking Ronnie out of the scene. There's the background. What I've done to make that feel real, there's a tool called the Wiggler. So what you do is you set a position here, keyframe it, you make a position at the end, keyframe it, and then press apply once you've done the magnitude and the frequency. So the frequency is how fast it will happen. So if you want a really jittery look, like a tremor or an earthquake of some sort, you would turn that higher, not too high. That is still very delicate, that setting. And the magnitude is sort of how much it shakes about. So typically I'll have frequency on like 1 or 2 because I need that to be very subtle. I'd rather big motions rather than sort of fast, shorter motions. So magnitude high, frequency low, and then you press that frame and the last frame, and then you press apply. What I do, it will then generate this. What I do from there is I highlight all of those frames and press F9 again to ease it in to make it feel more smooth, because it can still look jagged out of that system. What I've done on top, there's a lot of layers. So basically, let's take out this for a second. You'll see that this is what it looked like, and it didn't look incredibly impressive, so I wanted to add some sort of visual stimulus over the top. So I've got these lens sort of distortion effects over the top, and that again is tracked to the base layer. So if it wasn't tracked to it, it would stay in the same place, but as the camera moves, these lens flares follow the camera, well, they follow the background, which is acting as camera in this case. So after that, it goes to this, goes back to that scene. Now this is something really cool. So the handy thing is, with everything tracked to that background layer, if you were to do a zoom in, then everything moves in relation to each other. This actually wasn't a zoom in as much as a scale up. So in fact, I just added a scale. So I zoomed the background in. That's all it's doing there really, it's zooming the background in. But at the same time, I had this motion camera lens blur, which sort of recreates the look of like lens bokeh. And as soon as you zoom in, so I got the scale parameters there, and I went onto the camera blur at the exact same point, and I changed it from 1, which it currently is because it's still blurred. Without that, it would look like this. Not a huge difference, but it's important. It's the little details in visual effects that make the biggest difference. So it goes up, and it goes all the way up to 7. And so you can see it stays at 7, so the background's blurrier, you get those sort of synthetic circles. And then it goes back down when it zooms out, and that is really, really effective, that whole like look, you know. So I absolutely love anything like that when it comes to visual effects. That's basically it for this shot. It zooms in again at the end, and I slowly have the blur radius go higher and higher as well. And that's it for that one. Okay, so next we've got probably my favorite shot. This is the most technically impressive to me. The way that the camera moves, I'll show you that this is what was originally sent to me. It was a locked off shot where we wanted the polar bear to be on the right hand side, Chris to be on the left, and he sort of interacts with the polar bear. Now this required a few different things, a few different elements, and the thing I'm most proud of is that from this static shot, we've taken it to what looks like a handheld camera shot, which is really nice. So as we go through, you'll see that the camera pulls out, and the real trick here is the polar bear is moving in relation to the camera. What I mentioned earlier about tracking things to the scene, in fact, we're just pairing this to that layer. Because the shot is locked off the whole time, any movement that happens is synthetic. Because of that, we don't need to technically do any camera tracking, we just parent it to the layer because it's not really moving. It's just zooming in and zooming out, scaling up rather. So the interesting thing is even from the very beginning, this polar bear is in this shot. Again, that really sells it. So why did I decide to zoom in? I thought it would be great to do a reveal rather than just have the static shot like this. As we pull out of the shot, we can see both of them side by side, and it sort of adds a little bit of suspense in these few moments before that happens. It was very important to me about composition. So with the background layer, there is a thing called motion tile on the footage. Now, if you check this out, you can see it very clearly here. Chris's wall does not do this. This does not make any sense. And this is a really handy tool if you need to extend the background just a little bit. So if I was to turn this off, this is what happened when he zoomed out. So the shot sort of moves, but the top of it's cut off. So rather than trying to paint all of that back in, it's so easy to just turn on motion tile. So the output width and the output height, you extend them, you mirror the edges. So if you don't mirror the edges, it does that. So it takes the bottom of the frame, puts it at the top. You want to mirror the edges. Now this doesn't work for everything, and you can get some interesting effects, like a kaleidoscope effect. So even when I watch this back myself, you know, even though I'm the one who made it, I don't even see it because I'm too focused on what's happening in the center of the screen. So as you pull out, you can see the polar bear. Now there's a thing called rotoscoping, which I've done again, which is basically where I've cut out parts of the scene because Chris needs to be, this is quite lazy rotoscoping in some senses, but it's so fast that you don't see it. It's so fast that it sells the illusion and it's accurate enough. So you basically, this polar bear is sat to the side of Chris. If he throws his arm up, his arm has to be in front of that polar bear. The way to do that is you duplicate the layer, so you can do that, Control and D does that. And so essentially what you would do is, I mean, I went onto Roto Brush and you can sort of draw around different frames. We won't be showing that here because that's kind of an in-depth thing, but you would draw around him and go frame by frame, selecting each different element. You can do that by hand as well. Another technique that I used here was the puppet tool for the polar bear. So the puppet tool is really cool because you can move it about. I've got some different points here, there's one down there as well, which I've rigged, so you just move it back and forth. So you can put points on wherever you'd like, and it will move about at will where you want it to go, and that's super handy. Now granted, it's not talking, but even in the original game he doesn't have a mouth as such that moves, so you sort of get the idea from just this that it's talking. So I think that worked really well for this shot. And this takes us to our final shot of the film. So this is the very end where Professor Hector drops the pipe on Irate Gamer, and I really like this shot. Again, Chris sent me the footage and then he sent me just a blank slate from this shot taken at the same angle, so I'll show you why that's necessary in just a moment, because there's quite a lot going on here. He delivers his lines and then he looks up. And then at this point, he sort of falls down his sofa, and this is when the pipe comes in. So again, that motion blur that I mentioned earlier, super handy in a case like this. If it's coming straight down, your picture is going to be moving really fast, so that will develop more motion blur in After Effects, which is great because it sells it. So it's coming down really quick. So at this point, there's only 2 frames, so this one and this one, but you can see that his arms and fingers have already been cut off because that's where the slate comes in. This is essentially because, think about it, this area is not being occupied and this area is not being occupied. So at this point, it's only this bit that needs to be covered. You put in the blank slate over the top of it as this comes down. So this is essentially making a mask. As you see, the pipe here is coming down. The pipe is just from the front cover of the game. I just took that out in Photoshop and then dragged it down. This is the mask. So essentially what happens is it starts off, as I said, just covering the Irate Gamer there. As it goes down, I've moved that frame by frame, slowly, so it comes down, and Chris is completely out of the frame there. He's completely gone, so I've added more motion. So this is the whole Disney thing. So things need to sort of bounce and warp as it goes up. So what I've done is I've had the pipe come down, hit the surface with quite a lot of speed, and have it come back up and rise. So I've hand tracked all of this. It rises and then it comes back down at an angle, so it sort of stops in the air, so it sort of like moves up fast, stops, and then goes back down. So it goes down at an angle. So obviously the right hand side is going to hit the floor before the left hand side, so you do that and then have the left side slam down. So, and then it sort of shudders a little bit. This smoke is just a piece of stock footage that I found. I think it's Action FX. That was a humble bundle last month, and I think I just used it from that. It's just like an atmosphere dust cloud, and then it cuts to Professor. Now what I did is I used the same dust, but I zoomed it in from a different angle, more to the right hand side. So change it up, even if it's only slightly. You know, it's smoke, it doesn't have to be the highest quality, just zoom it in, add a bit of blur. You know the sort of drill at this point. So this is the same thing again. This was just moved by hand, moving the mouth, and it was easy enough, and that's it. That's the end of it. I think it went really, really well. I'm really happy with how the final thing turned out. You know, Chris liked the video, and I would love to work on more videos with him in the future. Yeah, ultimately this was a great experience, being able to work with the person that introduced me to visual effects in the first place. So I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to go and check out the video. The link is in the description now. And yeah, if you've never seen Irate Gamer before, go and subscribe to his channel. And if you came over from his channel to mine, welcome in. We will be doing more videos like this very soon. So yeah, subscribe for more content like this. And you've been watching LineageView. Thank you for your time, and I will see you very soon.